Alright, just put chain oil in the electric chainsaw. It's April 3rd, early morning. It was about 20 degrees last night. But it's going to warm up today, and the sap should be flowing in the maple trees really good today. About 4 or 5 days ago, I put an order in with North Spores, which is in Westbrook in southern Maine. He's a mushroom guy who inoculates things and makes mycelium. And I ordered a bunch of little wooden log plugs, little wooden dowel plugs that are myceliated. So they've been inoculated and they've been allowed to grow mycelium in a laboratory, in an area where they won't get contaminated. So hopefully I'll get those in the next week or so. But the best time to cut your trees, the trees for inoculation is when the sap is flowing really good, so all that sap and energy and extra sugar is in the logs. You can pretty much cut them at any time of the year, but if you cut them when the sap is flowing, you're more likely to get 2 or 3 full years out of your inoculated logs for production, for harvesting of mushrooms. So this year I ordered shiitake and oyster mushrooms, yellow oyster mushrooms. They're pretty high dollar mushrooms, so if I decide I want to sell them and they're really good mushrooms, then yeah, it's going to be my first year inoculating logs and growing mushrooms on logs. So I want to get out there today. I'm going to wait for it to get a little bit warmer so the sap is really flowing in the trees, and then we're going to go cut down probably 2 or 3 6 to 8 inch maple trees and cut them into 4.5, 5 foot sections, and then drag them on the sled back here. I have a couple trees in the woods here that I was saving for this project, and I'd say I'm gonna need about 6 4.5, 5 foot log sections for the shiitakes, and then I'll probably need 3 or 4 of the same size logs for the oyster mushrooms. And that's probably going to be enough logs for what I have coming this year. And then next year we'll do another 9 logs of a couple different varieties. And then, you know, these logs that we make right now probably won't be producing for 12 months. They may produce something in fall, you know, in 6 months, 6, 7 months from now. They may produce their first run of mushrooms. But you really shouldn't count on getting mushrooms your first year that you inoculate the logs. It could happen, but you should probably assume that you're not going to get mushrooms on your logs until 12 months later. So like the following spring, you will definitely be getting mushrooms on those logs every time it rains or when the snow melts. Every time those logs are wet and warm enough that they can produce mushrooms, they'll probably produce mushrooms as long as the log doesn't get contaminated. So I'm gonna like take the logs down and clean them up and then keep them on the gravel driveway and not put them in the grass. You just want to minimize how much other spores and fungi from the environment has contact with those logs before you inoculate them with the mycelium you're trying to use, because you don't want your mycelium and your fungus that you're trying to grow to be fighting other fungus in the log. Once the mycelium gets established in the log and the log is like pretty much being taken over by the fungi that you put in there, it will be able to fight off other funguses, and then it won't have a problem. But the first 6 weeks or so, you really want that log to only be dealing with the mycelium you already introduced, you already inoculated it with. So I got the electric saw, I got my Grants Force Brooks axe, and I got a crappy sled that I don't mind dragging across the bare ground because we don't have any snow anymore. And let's head out into the woods and try to find these 3 trees and get them cut down and brought back to the property so I'll have them. You don't want to cut You don't want to cut these logs more than 3 or 4 weeks before you inoculate them normally. Just because, like I said, like other fungus and stuff can get introduced to the log, and you're gonna wax all the holes. But we'll go through all that when the plugs come and we start inoculating these logs. I'll make it all one video. We're gonna go cut the trees, have the trees sitting here. We're cutting the trees right now because we probably only have another week that the sap will be running, and then it will warm up here enough that the sap will run here and there, maybe one day or two here and there. But like right now is the peak season. It's going to be the highest sugars the tree will have, so that's when we want to harvest these logs. So there's a lot of nutrients there for these mushrooms. You know, more nutrients there is in the logs that you inoculate, longer they're going to produce. All right, so I'm going to go get these. I have these 2 crows on the property. I think they're nesting in this pine tree here, and they've been so loud the last couple days, and they're just hanging out here, so you definitely hear those throughout the day. Well, let's go get these logs down, and then those logs will sit here for hopefully no more than a week. But I made the order almost a week ago, and it usually takes 2 to 3 weeks for this company to send your spores out. So let's go chop some trees. All right, I don't have the tripod, but this is Camp 5. This is the spot. There's a road right here. This is gonna be a camp that's gonna be for rent, and that my dad will use when he comes up here and hangs out. And it's gonna be easy access to the road here. And I got big piles of brush because we cut trees down earlier this year. But that tree right there is pretty good size for mushrooms, so maybe I'll take that down. And this could be all firewood right here, and then this piece right here is really good size for mushrooms. So maybe I'll take that tree down and then cut the sections out for mushrooms, and then also make some firewood at the same time. And then I have this tree right here. That's a really good one, and that tree has to come down, so maybe I'll take that one down and make it into firewood and get a couple sections off of there too. You know, lower sections. If I can get lower sections though that have like no wider than 8 inches, that's pretty much perfect. Like that one's a pretty much perfect tree. There'll be like 2-3 good sections right there. And that lower stuff I think will have more nutrients in it too at this time of year, because it's just really pumping sugar up right now. So the bottom of that tree there should have a lot of sugar in it. So I think that's the first tree. I'll cut that down because that's not in the way of anything, and I can get that one down easily. So I didn't bring the tripod out, so I'll bring you back when we got a sled full of mushroom logs. I'm out of breath for hacking at this. You can see that though, it's full of sap. I don't know if you can see that, but it's like collecting here, all wet. It's not dripping, but it's flowing. Yeah, it's dripping right here. So this thing is running. This should be a perfect, highly nutritious log for these mushrooms. I'm super excited to pick up the saw and cut the back of that right there, and it should fall hopefully right where we want it and not damage these fir trees I have around. I'm trying to keep those alive. Here we go. Alright, well there she is, and it fell right where we wanted it. Didn't even touch these 2 fir trees. Beautiful fir trees. I want to keep them. But I probably get 3 or 4 or 5 foot sections out of this, and this thing was juicing real hard. It's like sap's running good. This should have lots of sugar in it. I'm pumped. I'm gonna cut it up into sections and then clean that up down there and cut the other stuff up into firewood, and then we'll haul some of it back to camp. I'll see you back at camp. Well, I'll see you when I got it all bucked up and on the sled. Yeah, look at that drippage. It's just oozing. That's just from the branches. So the branches definitely have a lot of flow too in them already. It's pretty sweet. But yeah, got stuff loaded up on the sled before I haul this one back.
this is 3 of them. Get another tree down and get another 3 down today, I'd be pretty happy. See, this has some of this green moss like growing on this tree here, and there really isn't that much. There's a spidery lichen looking stuff, but I think that's actually the moss starting off. So it's mostly just moss on here, but we'll take a metal brush when we go to inoculate these and we'll scrape as much of that off as possible, so there's not like other things living off of the log. We want just our mushroom to be living off of the log. So it's quite a haul through some pretty rough woods to get this back to the cabin. I'd say it's like 150 pounds in logs, 200 pounds. So I'll get to that. Well, she's a little hung up, but it was freaking leaning the opposite direction, so it totally missed this tree too that I was trying not to hit, rip all the branches off of. This is going to be a camp, so I want it to look nice down here. This thing's hung up. It's a lot of weight on that thin branch, so it might just break if I let it sit, but we want to get these mushroom logs out of here. This tree was juicing real hard, so I guess I'm just going to cut it from underneath right here and try to stay clear from it, because it could roll in my direction. I don't want it landing on my leg or something. Alright, I'll come back when I got a sled load. Hauling these logs is a real good leg workout with no damn snow. Not far to go though. There's the cabin. First trip almost done. I dropped off the saw and axe already. Oh, those ones are a little skinnier than you normally want, but I'm going to try at least one of those and see what the difference is with different size logs. Kind of do some tests this year with this first batch, but there's still 2 more pretty good sized chunks out there that they were connected still, and the saw died, and I forgot to bring the axe back over there, so I got to go over there with an axe and get that free. But I'll probably grab those tomorrow, or it's gonna rain tomorrow, so probably the next day. But just keep them sitting here. Hopefully these plugs come soon. We'll finish this video up, and yeah, this should be an interesting project, inoculating these logs, and then on the channel we'll just follow it over the next couple years and see how many mushrooms and what kind of activity we get on these logs. Should be a fun project, so I'll bring you guys back once we get to the next stage. Spread the spores. Just finally got this package from North Spore Mushroom. This has all the plugs in it for our logs over here, so I guess we're gonna work on that project today and get this stuff going, although it's really warm and I'm gonna have to run the wood stove to melt the wax for this project. So yeah, we'll still probably do it today. I really want to get this done. It did end up taking 4 weeks to get this package. The website says 2 to 3 weeks, but I guess they're having a really busy season this year. So I'll bust this open, and then either later today or tomorrow morning we'll get set up and get these logs all plugged up. Music's on. Alright, so just open this box up. We got this melting wax. So the wax you're going to use to seal up all the holes. It's really fine grained, so it should melt really easily. And then I bought this drill bit, which is made for these plugs, and it will drill a hole that's the exact size of the plug, so you don't have any extra space and the hole isn't deeper than it needs to be. So you just, it has like a depth like skirt here, so when you hit that you won't go any further. So 8.5 mil drill bit, and the drill bit for the wood plugs and the sawdust is different. The sawdust I think requires a little deeper of a hole, so make sure you get the right one for what you're doing. And then here we go, 500 plugs for shiitake, and they're myceliated pretty good. I mean, they all look like they have mycelium all around them for sure. They can be better though. Like, I don't know, if I let this sit for a little bit longer, it would become more white cake like this, like white hard cake. This whole thing would become a white hard cake if you let it sit long enough. like I said, they've been really busy over there, so I think they would have sent it maybe even a little bit more myceliated than this usually, but they're really busy this year. But these have definitely got enough on them that when you put them in, they'll do their job for sure. So that's shiitake. And then I've got this golden oyster mushroom. This should be a really beautiful, really nice mushroom. And this one is myceliated a little bit better. They probably started this one a couple days earlier than they started that one. The other one, although it says germination 2, so does the other one. So they might be about the same time, but this one might have just myceliated a little bit better. But the lighting's kind of crappy in here, but I just wanted to show you what it looked like when I opened the package here. I guess I'm going to go move the sawhorse around to a spot where we can make some good videos and where I will we'll be able to get all this work done, and we'll inoculate 5 or 6 logs today. So the package came with this. I figured I'd give you a quick look at this, and you can pause it if you want to look at any of the specifics on this thing. It's just a little guide to doing these mushroom logs. This kind of shows you the difficulties of each mushroom. Interesting, Chicken of the Woods is expert. You got to be Mother Nature basically to grow those. And then you have this page here, which is like talking about the plugs and the drill bits and the wax. And then you have this page here, which talks about the perfect time of the year to be cutting your trees. So you can pause on this if you want to take a closer look at this. But we're just getting to a stage where you don't want to cut the trees. That's why we cut them earlier in this video. We cut them when there's no leaves. But once the buds start showing, those buds will be taking all that sugar out of the tree. So you want that sugar to be in the tree when you cut it. A little more information here. A little information about how you should be drilling the holes and where you should be setting your logs. Some more stuff. Oh, here's some stump stuff. Huh, that's interesting. I was thinking about just drilling some holes in some stumps and putting some plugs in there just to see what happens. Because the stumps, you know, they'll last a couple years on the property, and some of them are too big and I don't feel like burning them out. So I figured if I just put some holes in them, I could maybe get them to grow some mushrooms and be doing something useful. Damn stumps are always in the way. So this is like what happens when they get too old or when they're not getting wet enough. If your logs aren't wet enough and you're not getting any production, you can get them really wet and they'll start producing a couple weeks after that. All right, well, that's the book. Let's go get set up out there. All right, so here we are with the first log. This one's like, I don't know, about 4 inches wide log. This is pretty small. This is one of the smaller ones I have, but it is recommended you do between 3 and 6 inch logs, like 6 inch wide logs, like a round. That way they're just not so heavy you can't move them around when you need to. You know, if you need to like bring them to water, or you need to move them to a place that's getting more shade, or once they're all colonized, you might want to stack them up in some sort of log cabin formation. And if they're too heavy, you won't be able to do that. With that said, if you're a big beast like me, you can probably do bigger logs. And I think bigger logs will produce longer, but you need to drill more holes in a bigger log and use a lot more plugs in a bigger log, and a bigger log might take a lot longer to colonize fully too. And it's not going to really produce mushrooms until the whole log, like everything inside of the bark, is colonized. So I don't have a wire brush that I can use for this, so I just have like a piece of firewood that's, you know, regular old piece of firewood, and I took it and I just scraped the outside of the bark here. I actually think this piece of wood works better than a wire brush, because a wire brush might score that bark up, and you don't want to damage the bark. The bark is like
gonna seal in the mycelium, and it's gonna seal out all the contaminants that could contaminate this log, which is other fungus and bacteria and stuff like that. So it's recommended to take something and just scrape off all the lichen and other fungus that might be growing on the outside of the bark. I don't know if that's 100% necessary. We do that just so we don't have any competition on the log for our mushrooms. But lichen and stuff that grows on the outside of the log are parasitic, and they actually grow off of the tree. So once the log is dead and the lichen can tell that the log is dead, it's probably going to die off anyways. Lichen really usually won't live on dead logs. But there is other stuff that will live on dead logs. Like right here, there's a little bit of moss here on this log, which I'll just scrape that off because that'll live on the dead log and take nutrients away from the mushrooms. And yeah, once you think you have this log pretty much cleaned up, got all the lichen and fungus and whatever else you think is on the outside off, nice and smooth, we're gonna start drilling our holes here. And after we drill our holes, we'll cut off these ends fresh, so the ends of the log are freshly cut, and then we'll cover those in wax when we have all the holes done. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to drill the holes in 2 logs and get 2 logs all set up and ready for plugs, and then I'll start melting the wax. I don't have a crock pot, so I'm going to be melting the wax on a double boiler on the wood stove. So I'm gonna just get to drilling these holes and pretty much start anywhere. Pretty simple. You'll hit the stopper on this drill bit that we got from North Spores, and just do a nice row all the way down the whole log. I'd say keep the holes spread like, I don't know, 3 to 4 inches. I mean, each log is going to take quite a bit of plugs, you know, like a log this size is probably going to take like 30 to 40 plugs. And if you go bigger, you're going to, a 3 to 4 foot section of a log is going to take like 30 to 60 plugs maybe. We ordered 1,000 plugs with this one, so we should be able to do 10 logs in all. So you just keep on drilling your holes, and more holes and more plugs you have in a log, faster it's going to colonize. So you could keep all these holes really tight and drill a lot more holes and put a lot more plugs than you would even need to in a log normally. If you want the log to colonize quicker, you could do that, and that would help make the colonization go a little bit faster. But you also, you know, when you're buying the plugs, you're not making them yourself, which I did. I bought all my plugs from North Spore. Yeah, in my case, I want the plugs to go as far as they can, you know. I'd like to only get 30 plugs into this log right here, because I think this log will still colonize pretty fast enough with just 30 plugs in it. And then that way I can get more logs. And these logs will take a while too. Like, colonization will take up to a year. So you probably won't see your first batch of mushrooms until 12 months later. The first rain you get after about 10 to 12 months, then you'll start seeing them. So I'm just gonna go through and do this whole row here, right in the straight. All right, so that's halfway down the log. Let's pretend I did it all the way down the log, and then you would come in to do your second row. And when you do your second row, you're gonna do these ones off center to the holes you just made.
which will make kind of a diamond pattern. And now I'm gonna do that to this whole log. I'll bring you in here close for a second and take a look at these holes here. See, this is what we do. So you do one line down the middle and then do these ones off to the side, and then you'll do another line, and it will be like a triangle pattern basically, if you connected the dots. So that's what I'm going to do to this whole log on both sides, and we're going to test some stuff out, because I'm going to put a couple logs that are on the ground permanently, that I'm going to put trenches and put them on the ground permanently like they were just dying trees in the woods, and those ones I'm only going to put holes in the top. And we're also going to test out some much bigger logs, and we'll see what we can come up with in this experiment this year. And I want to see how much faster small logs colonize than bigger logs, and how much longer big logs produce than small logs. So I'm going to get to doing the holes in this and another log, and then once I'm done with that and ready for wax and ready to pound the plugs in, I'll bring you guys back. Alright, so I got the holes drilled in both of these two logs, and this log I put a couple holes on the ends too, and I'm gonna put some plugs on the ends before I wax them off, but I'm not gonna do it on that one to see if it makes any difference. It's not recommended by anybody, but I think if you had a plug or two on the end, that would just help with colonization a little bit faster. So I gotta go grab these plugs and a hammer, and I guess we'll pound all these plugs in first, and then we'll bring the hot wax over and just fill all the holes. Plane just went over. But here we are with this bag of spore plugs, and I'm probably being a little over paranoid, but I hit my hammer, the hammer that I'm gonna use to pound these in. I clean that off with rubbing alcohol so that the hammer doesn't have any contaminants on it. And the hand that I'm dealing with the plugs with, I'm going to wear a glove. Once mycelium is established like this, it's very resilient and it can fight off things really well, so you probably don't need to do this, but I'm going to do it. And also, something to consider, I'm not going to just do this 2 logs today. I'm going to do this whole bag, because once you open this bag of spore up, it could get contaminated. I'm sure it would last a couple of days open while you're doing the project, but you definitely, once you have this opened, you want to get them in the logs and sealed off with wax, like pretty quick, because contamination is what will ruin this whole project for you, you know? Like, that's pretty much the only thing that can ruin the project. Once it's myceliated, and you put it in the log, the only way that this thing will not produce mushrooms is if it's not staying wet enough, or if contamination kills the mycelium. So I'm gonna get this open and start pounding these suckers in. Smells quite nice, actually. I was kind of expecting it to smell weird, but it doesn't. It smells really nice. So there's a really nice one. It's got a bunch of white chunk on it. I'm just gonna stuff that mycelium right down in the hole. And then since we bought the drill bit that was made for these plugs from North Spore, they should all go in real nice and smooth. You might not even have to use the hammer. Yeah, you can pretty much push them in with your thumb. But I'm just gonna go through here and get all these plugs in here. And it's probably gonna take a while. Yeah, all the big chunks of mycelium cake you find in here just stuff right in the holes. Some of it's grain. They used grain, obviously, to inoculate these spawn here. Which I'll have to check to see what grain it is. Like, yeah, I don't know. Usually when you deal with grain, if someone has gluten tolerance, then you want to use corn grain instead of this kind of grain, I think. There goes the DOT. I think they're about to rip this road up this summer. I think they're going to be paving my road out here. So I'm just going to go through and fill all these holes with plugs. And it's going to take me a while, so I'll save you guys all that. Only taking longer than I thought it was gonna, but it's getting hot enough that it should be melted pretty soon here. And then I'm gonna let it sit on there and get as hot as it can, basically 200 degrees. And hopefully it will stay liquid long enough we can do this. All right, I gotta do this as quick as I can before this wax starts drying up. But basically, you just want to hit all the places you plugged, and you want to hit it enough that it's sealing the log completely up. And then you want to get the ends of the logs too. And it is recommended to get a crock pot and do this with a crock pot. And if you do it with a crock pot, you can kind of just dip these ends. And then you won't waste as much as I am here. But there we go. The end is all done up. And then you just go through and hit every plug. Flip the log. I'm gonna have to heat this wax back up before I can do the second log. And this is just a little wool dauber. You can use a small paintbrush too, or something like that. I have these little wool dabbers for some leather work stuff I have. Oh, it's staying liquid for me, which is good. Looks like I'll be able to get this one log done before I have to heat the wax back up. Getting my sawhorse covered in wax, but that doesn't matter. And you can't put too much wax on. And any place where you had to like cut a branch off and there's a wood exposed, cover that all in wax too. So you're just sealing off this bark completely, you know? So there's no wood showing that can get contaminated with other fungus. Surprised, this wax is just starting to get hard. I think I'll be able to get these last ones done. Definitely hardening up though. I'm gonna tip this one up like this. Wax is just barely holding on here. I'm gonna have to go put this back on the stove before we do this next log. All right. There we go. You can see it's all sealed off on both ends. I'm gonna go put this back in the hot water, and that first log is done. And then over there in the woods, once the leaves come in, over there it gets a lot of shade. It gets a little bit of sun because they do need some sun, but pretty much shade. And it stays really moist and stuff over there on the other side of the garden where those trees are growing, those gray birch. And that's where I'll lay those logs down. So I gotta go melt this wax back down, and I gotta do about 4 more logs like this today. DOT's doing a crap load of work on the road over here. It's kind of loud. But I'm down to my last plugs, and I decided instead of doing it one last log that I would do this stump. As I was reading that if you do a stump properly, it can produce mushrooms for up to 10 years. So I got this stump all drilled with holes and put all the spawn plugs in there. And now I have 1 more log over there on the horse. So I'm gonna go get some wax and seal this stump off and seal that log off, and then the shiitake mushrooms will be done for the year. And hopefully that stump gets enough shade throughout the year that it'll produce some mushrooms here. So we'll see what happens. All right, well, here we are with this first log, and I'm gonna go grab the second one and lay it out here. I got them all waxed up. Everything's coated in wax that's supposed to be. It's all sealed off, and it's still kind of bright in this spot that we have right here because it's early spring, but in the next 4 days all the leaves will fill in right here at this spot, and it will be pretty much shaded all day except for like a couple 15-minute sections of the day where the sun gets to an angle where it does shine in here briefly. So there's a little bit of sun. You need a little bit of sun for the mushrooms, but for the most part you don't need a lot of sun, and you want it to be moist and nice and moist area for it. So this area right here off to the side of my yard that has this cover all summer with the leaves, it stays nice and moist in here, and I see mushrooms, wild mushrooms, growing around this area every year pretty much. So this should be a good spot for them. I'll put these 2 logs we have here all done, and then I'm gonna have to work on probably 4 more logs, and then we'll be through that bag of shiitake plugs. And I only bought a pound of that wax, and it looks like I'll probably only have enough wax to do the shiitake mushrooms. So I'm gonna have to do a prime shipment of paraffin wax tonight, a 2-day shipment, and that mycelium should be fine unrefrigerated for 2 days, but maybe I'll stick it in the cooler just for the hell of it. It should be fine for 2 days though. No problem, you know. Should be fine for a week, no problem. But if you're not going to use your spawn right away, you should store it in the refrigerator. There's a couple mushrooms you can't store in the refrigerator, like the pink oysters you have to use pretty much right away. They have a shelf life of about a month, and they can't be in cold temperatures. And then there's a couple other ones too. You'll have to look it up. I think it's like chestnut and a couple other mushrooms you can't put in the refrigerator. So some of them have like a 6-month shelf life out in regular temperatures, and some of them you have to use right away. But the shiitake and the oyster mushrooms that I use, you can store in the refrigerator for up to 6 months if you need to, and that will just slow that mycelium down. So yeah, I think it'll be fine, but I'm definitely gonna have to order more wax. That 1 pound of wax is not gonna be enough for all 1,000 plugs. Definitely a good idea to use the crock pot too, because the way that I'm heating the wax is a pain. You have to like use it as fast as you can and then go put it back on the heat.
So I'm excited about this project. We'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching and staying tuned for the whole video. And in 12 months, when this thing starts producing, it probably won't produce. If we're really lucky, it'll produce this fall 1 or 2 times, maybe, if we're really lucky. But you shouldn't really depend on your mushroom logs producing mushrooms sooner than 12 months, because they probably won't. And this is early spring in Maine right now. By early spring next year, this thing should be producing some shiitake mushrooms. So hopefully that's the case. Uncle Dave with DEECEE's Adventures. Thanks for watching my how to inoculate log video. I'll see you guys on the next one.